Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the sandals of a man who never wrote a single word, yet somehow rewrote the way humans think. The streets around you are dusty and loud, goat carts creaking by, market vendors shouting about olives and figs, and somewhere in the background, two men are loudly debating whether virtue can be taught or if it's just something the gods hand out like party favors. You're in Athens. Not the Instagram-filtered ruins version, but the hot, grimy, crowded city that buzzes with gossip, politics, and philosophical side-eyes. This is the late 5th century BCE, and you were just born into the world as a baby named Socrates, probably screaming, possibly bald, definitely destined to confuse people for centuries. No one's writing history books about you yet. Your dad's a stonemason, he works with his hands and doesn't talk too much. Your mom's a midwife, helping women push new lives into this busy world. If she knew what kind of birth metaphors you'd someday unleash on innocent dinner guests, she might have reconsidered. As a kid, you're already strange. The neighborhood kids are playing knucklebones, and you're asking things like, but what is a game, really? One early story, passed down by your more poetic admirers, says you stared at a wall for hours once, deep in thought, while your friends argued whether you were sleeping or meditating. The answer? Probably both. Historians still argue whether you received a formal education. Some say you trained with philosophers, others believe you just picked things up in the agora by relentlessly bothering people. Either way, you learn how to think, and, more dangerously, how to make other people think about what they believe. You're like the world's first pop-up critical thinking seminar, with no cancellation policy. Athens itself is a mess, by the way. Democracy is new and shaky, constantly wobbling between brilliance and mob rule. There's a war with Sparta always brewing, and if someone in power isn't being exiled, they're being blamed for corrupting the youth, which is a charge that will circle back to you, so just pin that thought. You grow up surrounded by temple ceremonies, public speeches, and marketplaces full of people who really like to hear themselves talk. And maybe, quietly, you start wondering why everyone seems so sure of everything. What's justice? What's truth? What's courage? No one agrees, but they all talk like they do. At this point, you're not famous. You're just a strange guy with a weird gait, people say you walk like a crab, and a stare that makes people uncomfortable. You probably don't care. You've got a mind full of questions, a stomach for simplicity, and sandals that have seen better days. Still, your friends, if we can call them that, start taking note. They tell stories about how you could spend hours standing still, deep in thought, ignoring everything around you. They complain that talking to you feels like being led into a pleasant field, only to realize it was a philosophical bear trap. And yet, they keep coming back. You're not rich, you don't write anything down, and your hygiene, well, let's say it wasn't winning awards. But you see people. You listen like their answers matter, even when you're about to gently obliterate those answers 5 minutes later. And though you don't know it yet, your life is going to spark revolutions of thought, existential crises, and thousands of coffee-fueled university arguments for centuries to come. But for now, you're just a wrinkly child of Athens, watching the city swirl around you, wondering why no one ever questions the things they say. It's a warm evening. The olive trees rustle in the breeze. Somewhere, a street musician plays a few notes on a lyre. And you, barefoot, maybe scratching your beard, are just getting started. You're not exactly what the poets would call handsome. In fact, one friend jokes your face looks like a satyr's mask that melted in the sun. Your nose is too wide, your eyes bulge like they're mid-thought, and your belly, well, let's just say the sculptors never fought over who got to carve your likeness. But your mind? That's something else. As you grow older, your curiosity gets sharper, and more annoying to everyone around you. While the other boys are flexing in the gymnasium, practicing their discus throws or dreaming of glory in battle, you're over in the corner asking why the gods let bad things happen to good people. The coach tells you to run laps, you ask what justice is. The coach never speaks to you again. Still, there's a strength in you. Not just mental, you've got a sturdy, stonecutter's frame. You train like everyone else, you wrestle, you sweat, you bleed. Some days, you probably even enjoy it. But the way your mind keeps looping back to strange questions, questions with no clear answer, starts to set you apart. Your friends, such as they are, start noticing your, let's call it, philosophical persistence. One of them swears you spent an entire afternoon arguing whether it was better to be hit by a just man or praised by a wicked one. Another says you stood still in the agora for hours, eyes locked on nothing, looking like a statue of confusion, god of headaches. Historians still argue whether this was deep thinking or dramatic flair. Either way, it works. People remember you. You try out a few trades because, well, money exists. First, stone cutting, like your dad. There's a kind of peace in shaping something solid, in putting your hands to the rock and walking away with a column. But eventually, chiseling marble doesn't quite scratch the itch in your brain. Then you try sculpting. You even claim to have made a statue of the Graces, those elegant goddesses of charm, beauty, and creativity. Which is hilarious, considering you look like the after photo of a philosophical breakdown. But hey, art is subjective. That doesn't last either. Turns out, you're much better at sculpting thoughts than statues. You carve away assumptions, chip at logic, and shape dialogues that leave people blinking in confusion. Unfortunately, those don't pay as well. Your friends get used to seeing you in one outfit, simple tunic, no sandals, no pretense. You reject luxury the way most people reject cold soup. Your home is modest, your meals are plain, and your needs are few. Contentment, you tell people, comes from reducing desire, not increasing possessions. They nod sagely, then go buy olives and wine they can't afford. Occasionally, you show up at symposiums, those upper-class drinking parties where philosophy and gossip mingle like watered-down wine. You don't drink much, but you never leave without starting some argument about whether courage is knowing you'll die or pretending you won't. One night, a friend describes you this way: he's the only man who knows nothing, but somehow makes you feel like you know even less. Which is both a compliment and a complaint. Athens is shifting. The Peloponnesian War brews in the distance. Young men are being drafted. Politics turn sharper. And in the middle of it all, you're sitting cross-legged in the square, talking circles around men twice your rank. No one quite knows what to do with you. You're too clever to ignore, too annoying to praise, and too fascinating to forget. And then, the Oracle of Delphi makes a mistake. You're in your 30s now. Maybe early 40s. Time in Athens isn't tracked with birthday candles, it's measured in festivals, failed reforms, and awkward public speeches. You still haven't written anything down, because why ruin a perfectly good thought with ink? One day, your friend Xenophon, nervous, excitable, always 5 steps behind your logic, visits the Oracle of Delphi. That alone should have raised a few eyebrows, but he's insistent. He wants clarity. He wants answers. He wants to know, out of sheer curiosity, who the wisest man in Athens is. And the oracle replies, Socrates. Just like that. One name. Yours. Now, if someone had told you this in the middle of your olive cellar argument, you probably would have snorted and asked them to define wise. But Xenophon comes rushing back like a messenger from Olympus, all breathless and sweaty. And the moment you hear what the oracle said, you freeze. Because you don't feel wise. Not even close. In fact, you feel like you know almost nothing, less than most, really. And that's when it hits you, maybe that's the point. You take this strange declaration and turn it into a mission. You decide to test the oracle. You walk through the streets of Athens, poking at people's minds like a dog sniffing out buried bones. You start with politicians. They talk loudly, use big words, and absolutely cannot admit when they're wrong. So naturally, they fail your test almost immediately. You ask what justice is, and they give you slogans. You ask what good governance means, and they quote their own speeches. You nod, you smile, and then you gently reveal that their reasoning is made of soggy parchment. They don't like that. Next up, poets. Surely the artists, the inspired ones, will offer something real. But when you question them about their poems, they can't explain what they mean. It just came to me, they say. The muses whispered it. You scratch your beard and wonder if that's wisdom or just really good branding. Then you try craftsmen. Now this is more promising. They actually know things. A carpenter can explain joints and angles. A cobbler knows leather and soles. But the moment they start speaking outside their field, politics, love, ethics, they crumble into the same vague answers as everyone else. So you come to a conclusion. Not loudly, but firmly. You are wise only in this, that you know you don't know. And in Athens, that's enough to get people talking. Historians still argue whether this was Socratic humility or a subtle form of self-promotion. Some say you used the oracle's words as cover for intellectual guerrilla warfare. Others think you genuinely saw yourself as a kind of gadfly, buzzing around the thick skin of the state, trying to provoke awareness before someone swatted you. But your friends, they're confused. You're not wise, says one. You barely own sandals. You're definitely not wise, says another. You once debated a teenager for 3 hours about whether his dog was just or merely dog-like. And yet, there's something different now. A slow building gravity. People start gathering when you speak. They watch how you pull threads from conversation, unravel assumptions like loose togas. You don't teach, you tease. You don't preach, you poke. Some adore you. Some avoid you. A few start writing down what you say, even though you insist writing is like painting with shadows. You're not leading a school. You're not forming a cult. You're not even trying to be famous. But the oracle spoke. And now, you're not just a man in Athens. You're that man. You don't change your tunic after the oracle's declaration. You don't move to a bigger house or start charging admission for conversations. You just keep walking through Athens, barefoot as ever, asking questions that sound simple, until someone tries to answer. But now, people start treating you like a paradox in a toga. Even your closest friends aren't quite sure what to make of you. One morning, you're leaning against a column outside the gymnasium, chatting with a few young men who haven't figured out you're about to philosophically body slam them. You ask, what is virtue? One says courage. Another says honesty. A third stares at his sandals and pretends he didn't hear. You nod along, ask a few more questions, and within minutes they're tangled in their own answers, sweating like they've just run laps. You haven't taught us anything, one says, frustrated. You smile. Exactly. Your method is starting to form, what later scholars will call the Socratic method, even though you'd probably hate that label. You ask. You dismantle. You ask again. It's like peeling onions made of opinions, layer by teary layer. Your goal isn't to replace people's beliefs. You just want them to look at those beliefs in the daylight. And it turns out, most folks are wearing philosophical sunglasses at all times. The elders in the city, especially those in power, aren't amused. They think you're sowing doubt, encouraging disrespect, making the youth question tradition. You think you're saving the soul of the city, one awkward conversation at a time. Historians still argue whether your approach was genuinely noble or a kind of intellectual trolling. After all, you rarely give answers, just more questions. You never published a theory, never declared a school of thought. You're like a mental mirror, whoever stands before you mostly sees their own confusion. And yet, they keep coming. One of your most persistent followers is a plump, curious kid named Plato. He's got a forehead made for frowning and a tendency to write everything down. You've told him many times that writing is inferior to memory, that it weakens the soul's grasp on truth. He nods, thanks you, then sneaks off to scribble your words on a wax tablet. You let him. He's harmless. Bright. A little dramatic. But who isn't? Meanwhile, Athens keeps stumbling forward, wars, betrayals, shifting alliances. You rarely comment on politics directly, but everyone knows you have influence. Your presence at public gatherings is starting to feel like a subtle protest. And then there's this one story, a fringe anecdote, barely remembered, that you once stopped a mob from killing a man by simply standing in the way and asking, what justice is served by becoming what you hate? The mob dissolved. No one remembers the man's name, but they remember yours. At night, you don't retire to scrolls or sacred texts. You walk. You think. You speak with strangers by lamplight, let dogs lick your hands, and occasionally fall asleep on stone steps under the stars. You say your mind is your real home, and Athens, flawed as it is, remains the only city that can handle you. But not everyone agrees. The elders whisper that you're corrupting the youth. That your questions erode morality. That your constant examination of everything is less philosophy, more infection. You call it midlife clarity. They call it civic decay. Still, your friends stick around, confused as ever. They don't always understand your goals. They argue about your tone. But they keep following you, like philosophers with loose sandals and even looser definitions of virtue. Because no one else makes them think this way. And no one else listens so deeply to what they don't say. At some point, it becomes a pattern. You show up, start with a casual, what is justice, or, is courage still courage if you're bad at it? And by the end of the conversation, 3 grown men have admitted they don't know what they thought they knew, and someone stormed off muttering about how Socrates ruins everything. You've perfected the art of non-answers. Not because you're evasive, but because you sincerely believe the truth isn't something you can hand people like a cup of wine. They have to uncover it themselves. You're just there to hold the lantern, shining it into corners they didn't know existed. Your friends try to warn people. He's going to trap you, they say. Don't take the bait. But they still fall for it. Every time. You stroll up, all friendly curiosity, beard a bit crooked from sleep, eyes squinting into the sun. Quick question, you begin, and that's when the trap is already closing. You even mess with the sophists, those professional arguers who get paid to teach rhetoric. You think they're fakes, selling shiny words with hollow insides. They, in turn, think you're a barefoot menace who's ruining their business. One particularly wealthy sophist, Gorgias, tries to out-talk you. He launches into a glorious, 45-minute monologue about persuasion. You listen quietly. Then ask, but if someone persuades others of something false, is that still a skill? Or just a prettier kind of lying? Gorgias glares. Your friends sigh. Historians still debate whether you were aware of how deeply you offended people, or if you genuinely thought this was all a cheerful community service. Were you a selfless midwife of ideas? Or a well-meaning mental prankster? Or both? One night, at a symposium full of tipsy philosophers and important men reclining on couches, you dismantle a famous general's definition of bravery so thoroughly that he spends the rest of the evening refilling wine cups just to avoid eye contact. A few people try to imitate you. They walk around the agora asking questions, but they lack your timing, your subtlety, your calm stare that says, "I'm not here to win, I'm here to witness you falling apart in your own logic." It's almost artful. But your friends, they're exhausted. "You made my uncle cry," says one. "You asked my cousin if he deserved to be happy," says another. At a wedding. Yet they stay. Because something about you makes them feel awake, even if it's the kind of awake that leads to pacing at 3 a.m. wondering whether justice is just a social contract enforced by tradition. You don't offer peace. You offer presence. And somehow, that's more valuable. Then there's your strange inner voice. You call it your daimonion, a kind of divine whisper that doesn't tell you what to do, but warns you when you're about to do something wrong. Like a moral traffic light that only flashes red. You tell people this casually, as if everyone has one. Most just nod politely and avoid the topic. This little spiritual radar keeps you from giving bad advice, or leading. You famously refuse to enter politics, even when begged to. You say the soul of the city can't be saved by laws alone. You'd rather challenge the minds of individuals than battle mobs with slogans. And perhaps that's why your questions feel dangerous. Because they're not meant to decorate a scroll. They're meant to unravel you, softly, gently, until all that's left is the raw, uncertain truth. Your friends watch all this with the same expression, affection, frustration, and mild philosophical whiplash. You're like that one teacher who never answers your emails directly, but always leaves you thinking harder than you wanted to. And the city. It's beginning to notice. You've never been one to chase admirers. And yet, here they come, flocking in robes and sandals, drawn by the weird gravitational pull of your questions. Among them, Alcibiades. Oh, Alcibiades. The human contradiction. He's younger than you, absurdly attractive, with curls that could make statues jealous and a confidence that borders on divine delusion. He's clever, reckless, magnetic, and possibly the only person in Athens who confuses you. Not with arguments, but with unpredictability. He struts into your life like a marble statue come to life, fresh from charm school and probably trailing 5 dramatic scandals. Everyone wants him, politicians, generals, poets, enemies. But for some reason, he wants your attention. And you? You treat him like any other confused young man. You question his motives, poke holes in his ambitions, and remind him, repeatedly, that being good-looking and persuasive is not the same as being virtuous. To your friends, this pairing is confusing. They whisper. They theorize. They point to Alcibiades' speech at a symposium, where he, mid-wine, declares you're the only man he's ever loved who won't love him back. You just sip your watered-down wine and nod slowly. Desire, you say, should chase the soul, not the skin. He throws a cushion at you. Historians still argue whether your relationship was romantic, paternal, purely intellectual, or a masterclass in Socratic friend-zoning. Whatever it was, it left an impression. Alcibiades would go on to betray Athens, Sparta, Persia, and possibly his own reflection. But you stayed rooted, constant, annoying, and impossible to flatter. He wasn't the only strange magnet around you. There was Critias, who'd later help lead the infamous 30 Tyrants. There was Xenophon, who'd write about your conversations like they were battle reports. And, of course, Plato, your long-suffering note-taker, whose eyebrows rose higher each time you said something outrageous in public. Your circle was a philosophical petri dish, curious minds, sharp tongues, and more drama than a Sophocles play. They came to you not for answers, but for that rare moment of truthful discomfort, the flash of insight that followed the collapse of lazy certainty. But their presence also brought attention. And not all of it was good. Older citizens started saying things like, "Socrates turned my son into a smart mouth." Or, "He used to believe in the gods, now he believes in nothing." It didn't help that you never denied the rumors. When asked if you believed in the gods of Athens, you'd shrug and ask, "What is belief? And how do you define a god?" Which is not the answer nervous city officials want to hear. You talked about one divine force, a kind of moral intelligence woven through the cosmos, too vast and mysterious for temple rituals or golden idols. You weren't trying to tear down Olympus, you were just trying to think beyond it. But nuance isn't a strong suit of angry mobs or bureaucrats. And Alcibiades, charming chaos that he is, made everything worse. His scandals became your shadows. His betrayals. Guilt by association. Your friends. Confused. They loved you for your clarity, your patience, your refusal to play by political rules. But even they had to admit, things were getting tense. Athens was changing. War had taken its toll. The democracy was wounded, lashing out. People wanted certainty, not questions. Order, not open-ended dialogues. Obedience, not young men quoting Socrates at dinner tables. And through it all, you kept walking. Asking. Smiling. Unmoved by power. Untouched by flattery. Unimpressed by the very fame that now threatened to bring you down. Because, as you like to remind people, an unexamined life is not worth living. And unfortunately for you, the city was about to examine yours. You've always been more of a thinker than a fighter. But Athens doesn't care. It needs soldiers, and so you serve. 3 times, in fact. You march into the Peloponnesian War with a shield slung over your back and sandals that probably should have been retired years ago. You're not exactly the hero type, no dramatic speeches, no posing atop a hill with your sword glinting in the sun. But you show up. Quiet. Steady. Present. At Potidaea, they say you saved Alcibiades' life, dragged him off the battlefield after he fell, bleeding and beautiful. You didn't boast about it. In fact, you barely mentioned it. Your friends had to pry the story out of someone else. Later, during the siege of Delium, you're seen retreating not with panic, but with absolute, unnerving calm. Upright, measured, like a man strolling through a philosophy debate. One soldier said watching you walk was so surreal, he forgot to be afraid. Historians still argue whether this composure was bravery, stubbornness, or just you forgetting where the exit was. But here's what matters, you didn't just talk about courage. You walked it. Literally. After the wars, you returned to Athens. The city feels different. A little darker. A little more brittle. The war dragged on longer than anyone expected. People are tired. Suspicious. Poor. Democracy, once the proud invention of the city, is now bruised. Politicians fall like dominoes. Alliances shift overnight. Trust becomes expensive, and you, with your relentless questions, your bare feet, and your inconvenient truths, aren't exactly soothing. You're still wandering the agora, speaking to anyone who'll listen. You don't charge fees like the sophists. You don't take on students in the formal sense. You just talk. And question. And make people's brains sweat. One day, someone asks why you never ran for office. You reply, if I'd entered politics, I would have died long ago. Which sounds dramatic, until they realize you're probably right. You once did hold public office briefly. A tiny role, barely worth mentioning. But during your term, the city wanted to execute 10 generals for failing to retrieve bodies after a battle at sea. It was clearly illegal, unethical, and you refused to vote for it. They shouted, threatened, and you didn't budge. Your friends were nervous. "Can't you just go along, just once?" one asked. You said, "When a man knows something to be wrong, he must not do it, even if the city commands him." And then went back to your olives. Moments like that started adding up. Not just for your friends, but for your enemies. You weren't shouting in the streets, but you were changing minds. Quietly. Persistently. Unforgettably. And that's dangerous. Because Athens isn't in the mood for slow revolutions of thought. It wants order. Obedience. Simplicity. You offer none of those things. But you do offer something else, something even the war couldn't destroy. You offer the reminder that the soul, like the city, must be examined, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. Your friends try to understand this, but sometimes, even they wish you'd take a break. Maybe teach about happiness for a while, one suggests. You just smile, tap your chest, and say, to know yourself is happiness. And then you walk off barefoot, because your work is never really done. You never claim to be a family man, but you do get married, eventually. Her name is Xantippe, and history has not been kind to her. Most of what we know comes from your students, and let's be honest, they weren't exactly unbiased. They painted her as sharp-tongued, loud, perpetually exasperated, and possibly the only Athenian alive who could out-argue you at the breakfast table. But that's the thing, she could. While your friends made jokes about her temper, you just nodded, occasionally smiled, and once famously said, "If I can live with Xantippe, I can live with anyone." Whether that's love, endurance, or a philosophical experiment gone too far, no one's really sure. You have children, too. 3 sons, if the records are right. But you don't spend much time bragging about them. You barely talk about them at all. You say that virtue isn't inherited, that a man's character is shaped by his choices, not his bloodline. Which probably made family dinners incredibly awkward. Still, you're there, sometimes. When you're not pacing the agora or talking someone into an existential spiral, you're at home. Not necessarily helping with chores, but likely offering impromptu debates about the meaning of patience while your wife tries to wring out laundry. Historians still argue whether your marriage was loving, combative, or just a practical arrangement that survived on mutual eye rolls. One account says Xantippe once dumped a chamber pot over your head during an argument. You looked up, wiped your face, and said, "After thunder comes rain." Then presumably walked off barefoot and dripping, a little wetter but no less smug. Your friends mostly stay away from your home. Not because they dislike your wife, but because they can't handle 2 Socratic forces in one room. Meanwhile, your reputation outside continues to grow, sideways. You're not popular, exactly. But you are notorious. Like that one strange uncle who ruins holidays by asking if property is a natural right or a social illusion. You've never charged a single drachma for your teachings, but people still accuse you of corruption. You accept food from admirers sometimes, but never more than you need. Your home stays modest. Your clothes never change. And when someone asks how you can walk barefoot in winter, you shrug and say, "I've grown used to it." It's not that you dislike comfort, you just think chasing it is a waste of a soul. Your students, on the other hand, are increasingly uncomfortable. They love you, admire you, quote you. But they see where this is going. Your words are becoming a mirror. And some people, especially powerful ones, don't like what they see. Athens is still licking its wounds from war. It's searching for scapegoats. And you, bearded, barefoot, and full of inconvenient questions, look like one. Your friends try to warn you. Tone it down, one says. Teach something cheerful, another pleads. Just stop asking about justice for, like, 1 week, someone begs. But you can't. Because something deep inside you believes that a soul unexamined is a soul unlived. And if that puts you at odds with the city, well, it won't be the first time. It starts with a question, as always. This time, what is knowledge? Or maybe it's what is love, which, as you've discovered, is somehow an even more dangerous question in Athens. You're talking with a few of the usual suspects, bright-eyed youths with tunics slightly too clean, sandals slightly too new. They're eager, maybe too eager, quoting you before they fully understand you. One says, I think I understand courage now. You raise an eyebrow. Do you? By the end of the conversation, he's rethinking everything from battle tactics to bedtime routines. And that's the problem. Your method, the infamous Socratic method, doesn't feel like teaching. It feels like unteaching. You're not a fountain of answers. You're a sponge that soaks up certainty until people are left staring at the puddle. You start with something innocent. What is piety? What is friendship? What makes a life good? Simple stuff. But then your questions twist gently inward, like a spiral staircase leading people right into their own blind spots. Historians still argue whether you invented the method on purpose or whether it evolved naturally from your sheer inability to let flawed logic slide. Either way, it sticks. Even your critics admit you're good at it. But they also say it's dangerous. Because the people you question, they're not just random passers-by anymore. Some are generals. Some are lawmakers. Some have fragile egos wrapped in togas and political ambition. And when you show up asking, do you believe justice serves the strong or the many, they know it's not small talk. The method works like this: you pretend to know less than you do. You ask, and ask, and ask, never answering. Your tone stays soft, even playful. You seem genuinely curious. But the conversation becomes a slow burn, and before they know it, your target has talked themselves into a philosophical corner. Sometimes they thank you. Sometimes they walk away silently, eyes wide, like someone just whispered the meaning of life in reverse. And sometimes they get angry. Because you've exposed the hollowness in their beliefs, and worse, you've done it in public. Your friends have seen it too many times. They call it the Socratic spiral. A well-meaning person walks up thinking they're ready to engage. 30 minutes later, they're questioning whether laws exist or if language is just polite confusion. You've made it an art. And yet, you insist you're no teacher. I don't teach, you say. I help people give birth to their own understanding. A midwife of the mind. That's what you call yourself. Your mother delivered babies, you deliver discomfort, followed by, hopefully, clarity. You think it's noble. Some think it's infuriating. One man, after a particularly intense session, says, "You're like a gadfly on the city's back." You nod solemnly. Exactly. A gadfly. Annoying. Persistent. Buzzing at the great horse of Athens, trying to keep it from falling asleep. It's not the kind of metaphor that wins you medals. But it is, poetically, accurate. Your method spreads. Students imitate you, awkwardly. They wander around asking questions, trying to sound wise, forgetting that you spent decades listening before you spoke. Still, the damage, depending on who you ask, is done. You've become a fixture in the city. You ask too many questions. You make too many powerful people look foolish. You encourage too many young men to question the old rules. And even if you never meant to start a revolution, the city's watching you like you did. Your friends start to shift in their seats when your name comes up. They still love you, but they sense the air turning. Even Plato starts writing faster. Just in case. Because your questions, they're not just peeling back layers anymore. They're peeling the city raw. You've never lifted a sword against your city. You've never stolen from a temple, or insulted a god, or led an angry mob. All you've done, consistently, unrelentingly, is ask questions. And now, they're starting to answer back. Not with logic. Not with dialogue. But with charges. It starts quietly. Whispers in the agora. Raised eyebrows at symposiums. An offhand comment that old man's still turning kids against their fathers. And then one day, it's official, you're being accused of corrupting the youth and not believing in the city's gods. Your friends are stunned. But he prays, says one. He speaks of the divine, says another. He's barely awake half the time, someone mutters. But none of it matters. The trial is coming. Historians still debate whether this was about piety, politics, or a long-simmering grudge from powerful men you humiliated in public. Maybe all three. Maybe something simpler, Athens had changed, and you hadn't. A man named Miletus leads the charge. You barely know him, but apparently, you've been on his nerves for years. He stands in court and says you're poisoning young minds with dangerous ideas, turning them against tradition. You listen quietly. You don't sweat. You don't stammer. You just stand there, barefoot, aging, and unshakably calm. And then it's your turn to speak. Now this could be your moment to charm the jury. You could apologize, weep a little, blame old age, say it was all a misunderstanding. That's what people do when they want mercy. Instead, you double down. You explain your life's mission. That the unexamined life isn't worth living. That your daimonion, your inner voice, has always guided you toward truth, even if that truth was inconvenient. That you've never charged a fee, never forced anyone to follow you, never claimed wisdom, only curiosity. You say you've done more for Athens than anyone here. That if the city silences you, it silences its own conscience. You even joke. You say instead of punishment, the city should reward you. Give you free meals in the Prytaneum, the dining hall reserved for Olympic champions and honored guests. It's not arrogance. It's a dare. You've always said that fear of death is foolish, that no one knows whether death is a curse or a blessing. And now, you show them that you mean it. The jury isn't impressed. A few jurors look uncomfortable. A few seem moved. But most, they're offended, insulted, angry. The vote comes in, guilty. You're asked to suggest a punishment. A smart man might beg for exile. Offer to stay quiet. Pay a fine. You suggest free lunch. Again. Plato puts his face in his hands. The jury votes again. This time, the sentence is clear: death. Poison. Hemlock. Soon. Your friends are devastated. Some are furious. They call it a sham. A murder wrapped in legality. But you're quiet. Not shocked. Not afraid. Just thoughtful. You say, softly, no evil can happen to a good man, in life or after death. And you sit down. You've questioned courage your entire life. Now, it's your turn to show it. They give you time. Not much, but enough. A few days, maybe. Enough to let it sink in. Enough for your friends to scramble, writing letters, begging magistrates, planning escapes. Enough for people to whisper your name in the streets and shake their heads in disbelief. Socrates. Really? You're placed in a holding cell, a modest one, no shackles. Just stone walls, a wooden bench, and a few nervous guards who avoid eye contact like you might start asking them about virtue. Which, let's be honest, you probably already did. The poison hasn't come yet. That's the custom. You're sentenced, but they must wait for a ceremonial ship to return from Delos. Until then, Northwest executions can take place. It's a sacred pause, a superstitious loophole in a very real death sentence. And in that gap of time, your friends move. They visit daily. They bring bread, wine, questions, tears. Crito, your old companion, can barely look at you. He pleads, begs, for you to escape. The plan's ready. The guards have been bribed. There's a boat, waiting quietly in the harbor. You could slip away, vanish into exile, live your final years teaching in another city, barefoot and unbothered. You listen. You nod. You thank him. And then you say no. Because for all your defiance, you still believe in the rule of law. You've spent your life trying to understand justice, and now, at the end, you refuse to warp it for your own safety. Would I be the same Socrates, you ask, if I fled the consequences of my own convictions? Crito doesn't answer. He just covers his face. Historians still argue whether your decision was stubborn, brave, or symbolic theater. But your friends know you mean it. This isn't a performance. This is the culmination of everything you've said all along. If the soul matters more than the body, if virtue matters more than survival, then this final act, must be lived with intention. Your time in the cell becomes almost sacred. Not just for you, but for everyone who enters. Students, followers, even skeptics, each one steps through that doorway with reverence, sensing something strange and heavy in the air. You don't cry. You don't beg. You talk. You guide. You question. You reflect. And slowly, the cell becomes a classroom. You speak of the soul's immortality. Of death not as an end, but as a transition, like a philosopher shedding his earthly skin to seek clearer truth. You say the body is like a cage, and death is merely its key. Your friends aren't comforted. They admire your calm, but they're also terrified. Not just of your death, but of the emptiness that will follow. Even Plato, stoic, loyal, trying desperately to record your final thoughts, can barely speak. He stares at you with a kind of sorrow you pretend not to notice. And still, you smile. You reassure them. You quote poetry. You gently tease their panic. You remind them that fear is the child of ignorance, and you've spent your life trying to raise it into something nobler. Outside, the city hums like nothing's wrong. The agora is full. Merchants shout. Priests chant. The usual. Inside, the air grows still. The ship has returned. And the poison is on its way. The sun filters in through the narrow window, casting a soft rectangle of light across the floor of your cell. It's morning, but it doesn't feel like it. Time has taken on a strange weight, measured not in hours but in heartbeats, in breaths, in the heavy silence of your friends gathering for the last time. They file in quietly. No jokes today. No debates. Just eyes swollen from too little sleep and too many thoughts they're afraid to say out loud. The jailer enters, carrying a small cup. You know what it is. Hemlock. A bitter brew that will first numb your legs, then climb slowly upward until it finds your lungs and, finally, your heart. You've never had a flair for drama, but even you must admit, that's quite an exit. You take it with steady hands. No trembling. No hesitation. No grand speech. You hold it up for a moment. To health, you joke quietly, since now I shall be cured of many things. Historians still argue whether this final moment was exactly as Plato described it, solemn, graceful, touched with transcendence, or if he polished the truth into something more poetic. After all, he wasn't even there. He couldn't bear to watch. But others were. Crito is there. Apollodorus is weeping into his sleeve. Even the jailer, hardened by duty, avoids your eyes as he walks back out. You drink. The liquid is thick, earthy, foul. You don't flinch. You pass the cup back. And then, you walk, calmly, slowly, to the bench, and lie down. Your friends gather closer. They watch your breath. You lift the sheet to your chest. Don't forget to pay the rooster to Asclepius, you murmur, your final words. A quiet joke. A philosophical wink. A thank you to the god of healing. Because death, to you, was the final cure. The soul's release from the distractions of the flesh. A clean break from the noise of the body. The poison creeps upward. Your feet grow cold. Your legs go numb. You speak no more. Your chest rises. Falls. Rises. Then stops. No cries. No thunder. Just stillness. The friends around you are silent. Not from reverence, though there is plenty of that, but from the sheer realness of the moment. You, the men who filled their minds with questions, is now the question they cannot answer. They stay a long while. No one wants to be the first to leave. And eventually, one by one, they file out into the light. Outside, the streets are unchanged. Athens moves on. A city always looking forward, rarely back. But inside the minds of your friends, you remain. Not as a martyr. Not even as a teacher. But as a mirror. One they'll keep looking into, for the rest of their lives. You're gone, but your voice isn't. In the days that follow, your friends sit together in quiet courtyards and shaded porticos, replaying your words from memory. Not just the famous lines, but the odd metaphors, the quiet pauses, the strange way you turn a compliment into a challenge. And suddenly, everyone wants to define you. Plato, the ever-diligent student, begins writing furiously. Dialogue after dialogue. Reconstructing your questions, your expressions, even the way you used to squint just before dismantling someone's idea of virtue. His writings are stylized, of course. Socrates, the character, becomes larger than life. Clearer, sharper, maybe even a little more magical than the real man. Xenophon writes too, though his version is simpler. Less mystical. More practical. His Socrates is honorable, logical, basically a moral coach in sandals. The guy your parents wish you'd studied under instead of the other one. Your other friends try too, offering stories, retellings, little glimpses of conversations. But the more they remember, the more they realize they're remembering different versions of you. Historians still argue whether this patchwork legacy was the result of genuine diversity or simple confusion. Did you adapt your tone for different people? Were you testing each of them individually? Or did they just hear what they wanted to hear? It's hard to say. What's clear is this: no one agrees on what you actually meant. You asked about justice. Some say you thought it was obedience to the law. Others say it was harmony of the soul. A few think you were just trying to start fights at parties. You asked about virtue. Some say you believed it could be taught. Others say you claimed it was a divine gift. Some think you were making it all up as you went. You said you knew nothing. But you seemed to know so much about how to make others admit they didn't know either. Even your jokes become mysterious. Pay the rooster to Asclepius, you said. Did you mean life was a sickness cured by death? Or were you just being cheeky on your way out? You leave behind a body of work made entirely of other people's memories. A library with no books, only conversations echoed in someone else's voice. And yet, something about that is perfectly Socratic. You hated writing things down. You believed truth had to be lived, not recorded. The soul was shaped through dialogue, through tension, through the quiet discomfort of realizing you might have been wrong all along. Your legacy, then, isn't a doctrine. It's a question mark. Your friends, your students, even your critics, they carry that question forward. They debate it. Disagree over it. Build philosophies on top of it. Plato, in particular, takes your ideas and runs with them. Forms, ideals, shadows on cave walls, he builds an empire of thought on the foundation of your unfinished sentences. But it's not the same. Because you were never trying to build a school. You were trying to build a habit. A way of seeing. A way of doubting. A way of speaking truth so softly it sounded like a whisper, and hit like a wave. You didn't need to be right. You just needed others to ask. And now, that's exactly what they're doing. Years pass. Athens forgets quickly. It always has. Festivals resume, the agora bustles, philosophers argue over the price of figs, and politicians give speeches about justice with no hint of irony. But here and there, your name lingers. In quiet corners of the city, someone brings up a conversation they once had with you, under an olive tree, beside a fountain, outside the gymnasium. They don't remember what the topic was, but they remember how their stomach dropped when they realized they didn't know what they were talking about. You haunt people that way. Your students try to explain you, each in their own tone. Plato crafts grand dialogues, filled with structure and symbol, your words polished until they gleam like bronze. In the Apology, you're noble, poised, witty to the very end. In the Republic, you're visionary, chasing justice through the fog of imagined cities. But was that you? Xenophon's version of you is gentler, more practical, less mystic, more neighborly. His Socrates is the one who might help you build a fence while questioning whether fences are a metaphor for the soul. Between the two, a gap opens. Historians still argue whether either portrayal is accurate, or if both are elaborate masks worn by a man who refuse to wear any. Your method spreads. Slowly. Not like wildfire, more like a creeping root system, threading beneath the ground of Western thought. You're quoted, misquoted, weaponized in debates. Your name becomes shorthand for annoying but insightful questions. In time, people forget the awkwardness, the sandals, the crooked nose. You become an idea. A figure on scrolls. A bust on a pedestal. But the real you. The you your friends knew. You were barefoot on cold mornings, muttering about truth while scratching at your tunic. You were late to dinner because you got into an argument about whether courage and madness are siblings. You refused gifts, forgot birthdays, and once got lost walking home because you stopped to argue with a stranger about beauty. You weren't trying to start a movement. You were just trying to understand. And maybe, in that simplicity, lies the reason your influence won't die. Because generations later, in far-off lands, across oceans you never saw, people still sit quietly and ask, what is good? How should I live? Do I really know what I think I know? And if they're lucky, or cursed, they ask one question more. What would Socrates say? Your friends are older now. Some are gone. Plato keeps writing. Xenophon travels. Crito tells the story of your final days with a wistful look in his eyes. But none of them can quite agree on who you were. They all just know this. After you, thinking felt different. After you, certainty felt fragile. And after you, silence felt suspicious. Time moves on, the way it always does, unevenly, quietly, as if tiptoeing past memory. The world changes. Empires rise and crumble. Philosophers multiply like stray cats in an alley. Languages shift. Gods fall out of favor. But you, Socrates, somehow remain. Not in statues, though there are plenty. Not in relics or scrolls with your handwriting, because you never wrote a word. You live in the space between questions. In the awkward silence after someone realizes they don't know why they believe what they believe. It's your afterlife, really. Not the one promised by temples, but the one you earned. Your friends, what remains of them, keep talking. They grow older, slower, a little rounder. Plato becomes a teacher himself. He builds a school, scribbles metaphysical systems, and crafts a vision of truth you might have found a bit too clean. Still, he credits you as the root of it all. Crito stays quiet. He never writes a book, but he tells your story in alleys and market stalls. He's the reason someone hears of the philosopher who drank poison calmly, who refused exile, who thanked the god of healing with his last breath. Apollodorus, who wept like a child in your final hours, never quite recovers. He loved you without philosophy. Just love. The messy, loyal kind that didn't need arguments to explain itself. And as their lives unfold, your absence lingers. Not like a wound. More like a question that refuses to die. Historians still debate whether your death accomplished anything. Did it shake Athens into reflection? Did it change the path of Western thought? Or was it just another moment, lost in time, amplified only by the writings of those who couldn't let you go? No one knows for sure. But your legacy is strange. It's not a doctrine, or a creed, or a philosophy carved in stone. It's something softer, slipperier, infinitely more annoying. You left behind a method, a habit of mind, a kind of radical humility disguised as relentless curiosity. You taught people how to live without easy answers. And more importantly, you taught them that this was not a tragedy, but a triumph. To not know, to genuinely, deeply not know, was not weakness. It was freedom. Your friends tried to explain this to others. Some listened. Most didn't. But it didn't matter. Because that little flame, the one you lit with nothing but questions and a stubborn refusal to look away from ignorance, kept glowing. In a classroom in Alexandria. In a dialogue copied in a Roman villa. In the private journals of a medieval monk. In the margins of a Renaissance manuscript. In the thoughts of a student staring out a window 2,000 years later, wondering, what is a good life? It's not immortality in the way the poets promised. It's Messier. Truer. Yours. And now, the questions can rest. You've walked the stone streets of ancient Athens. You felt the sun on your bare shoulders, heard the low hum of debate in the distance, and stood at the edge of something vast and unknowable. You've watched a man refuse to flee, not out of pride, but out of a deep, quiet loyalty to his own examined life. The crowd has gone home. The city sleeps. The echoes of argument have faded into the soft sigh of olive branches shifting in the breeze. And you, gentle listener, careful thinker, wandering soul, can let the weight of all those questions fall away for now. You don't need answers tonight. Just the slow rhythm of breath, the feeling of your body sinking gently into stillness, and the fading memory of a man who lived by asking, not knowing. Because sometimes, peace doesn't come from solving. It comes from accepting that not every mystery demands a solution. Some just want to be held. So rest, quietly, in that open space. Let the thoughts drift. Let the mind wander, unchained. And if a question returns tomorrow, meet it not with fear, but with curiosity. Because if Socrates taught us anything, it's that wisdom begins where certainty ends. Sleep well.